we come up with the criteria of like, what is most important to you? Is it physical characteristics? Is it religion? Is it intelligence? Their value system? Does it complement your value system? I feel like it's really just beginning because all over the world, I think there's a general trend of, people are having kids later in life. People are having kids on their own more often than ever.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Donor Conception Conversations, the one podcast created exclusively for people who are on their journey to build their family with donor conception. I'm your host, Lisa Schumann. As a researcher, a therapist, and an expert in donor conception, I am passionate about helping people on their family building journey. After decades of work in the field, working at the best fertility clinics in the world, and through my own group, the Center for Family Building, I have run workshops for donor-conceived children and have met thousands of donors and recipients. And through this, I have learned so much, and I would like to share these things with you. In this podcast, my guests and I will share the tools and the truths that you need to have a better path to parenthood or to help you tackle tough parenting issues. If it's about donor conception, we're going to talk about it. And today, I am welcoming Ivan Fatovich, the founder and CEO of Modamily, an online website that helps people build their families. They provide several services, but I'm going to let Ivan talk to you about them. And it's a very new and interesting way to look at donor conception, which I think a lot of you will be very curious about. But it's so fascinating that our world is changing. And I think that Ivan has really taken hold of that and brought on a new way for us all to see donor conception. So welcome, Ivan. Nice to see you again.
Hi, Lisa. Nice to see you again, too. Thanks for having me.
So tell us, you're welcome. Tell us a little bit about Modamily and how it works and how you started the group.
So Modamily, short for Modern Family. I started it around 10 years ago in New York City. I lived in Los Angeles most of my adult life, and but I grew up in Fort Lee, New Jersey, right over the bridge there. And I moved back to New York for a few years, and I was on the more traditional dating apps like Match.com of the day and OkCupid and sites like that. And a lot of my friends in my peer group were 35, approaching 40. Many were still single. Many were not married. My female friends in particular were, starting to feel the ticking of the biological clock, and they needed to make some decision. And some of them in particular were, one of their top life goals was to become a mother. And they found themselves in a position where they were single and they felt that time was running out because in the dating world, you usually you have to get to know someone. This is not, have a baby next week with someone you meet online.
Right.
And maybe they would date someone for 6 months or a year and then realize this person is not serious about starting a family and not ready. And then most of the relationships that they were finding on these apps were more, casual hookups and are people that were just looking for a good time and not really looking to start a family. So I had one friend in particular who she was exploring sperm donation. She was exploring adoption. She was, talking to agencies in India about adopting and looking at all the other options. She would go out on dates and after a couple of drinks, be like, I want to have, 4 children in the next 5 years or something. And, not exactly what a typical guy wants to hear on the first date.
Right.
And I told her as a joke, I said, sounds like you're on a different dating site called dateinseminate.com. Something I just made up on the spot, and everyone kind of laughed. But then they thought about it and they're like, wait, does something like that exist? Because I would consider joining it because this is a different way of solving this problem that I'm having. So that was kind of like the light bulb moment. And I kind of started doing some research and I came up with, I found out about the concept of co-parenting, where people have children together. They might have been in a romantic relationship. They might just be friends. It could be a gay man and a straight woman and all these other modern family arrangements that have been kind of quietly happening for a while, but it was never really conscious or in an organized way. Usually people, say you're a lesbian couple or single mom by choice they would ask one of their friends if they would be their donor. And then, if you don't have friends, then you have to think of other options. And traditionally you'd go to the anonymous sperm bank, like California Cryobank or something like that, where you never get to meet the person. The kid doesn't know who their biodad is. Maybe when they're 18, they can meet the person. But, what I found is that the child usually wants to know a lot earlier than that. And even if they don't have, a day-to-day relationship with their donor, they want to meet the person, and maybe when they get older, have some kind of relationship with them that grows over time.
Yeah.
And I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen it all different ways, but that's kind of how it got started.
Well, that's fantastic. And so you used to be an
Yeah.
actor, right? And you decided to give it all up to do this.
Well, yeah, when I first moved to LA in the late 90s, I was an actor. And then I worked on all sides in Hollywood of the business. I worked at one of the large talent agencies and management companies. I've worked at production companies. I've written screenplays.
Wow.
So I've been on all sides of that. And then I also even worked in finance and in wealth management during the financial crisis after I got frustrated with Hollywood, and then started Modamily after that. When I was back in New York, I was back, spent most of my adult life in Los Angeles and meeting different kinds of people, and I just saw a kind of need for a service like this. So I really just took what some people liked about some of the more traditional dating sites, say like, profile pictures and compatibility questions, but instead of sex and dating questions, I would ask questions about parenting style and lifestyle and, what they're looking for in a donor or a co-parent. And then it kind of grew from there. And then we started, developing relationships with surrogacy agencies, egg donor agencies, family therapists, modern family attorneys that, they might have done adoption agreements or a donor agreement, but now they're doing co-parenting agreements and known donor agreements. So we have almost 100,000 people on the platform right now, and over 1,000 babies born around the world in either a co-parenting or a donor relationship. And I feel like we're still just getting started. We have a great major new update to the app that's coming out very, very soon. And I think it's going to even greatly improve the platform now. And so, people can either use the app or the website, kind of similar to a dating app, but you're looking for your donor or your co-parent. And we also have Modamily Concierge, where in a few cities like New York and Los Angeles, San Francisco, even London and Toronto, I've helped people personally where I can vet the donors and co-parents. I can get a family history. I basically do the searching and vetting for the clients so they don't have to, on an app, sometimes when you connect with someone, a lot of times you can pretty quickly know if this is the person you want to continue to get to know or not, but then you might be stuck on a date or something like that for a few hours. But so I do that part for you. And after I speak with a client, I kind of get a sense of what they're looking for. And then I go out there and find it for them. And then I pre-interview that person. And if I think it's someone that the client would like, I'll introduce them. And then it's really up to them to get to know each other. I also stress that you don't, like I said earlier, like, this is not meet someone online and have a baby next week. This is especially particularly in a co-parenting situation. Most people that had success got to know each other for 6 months to a year before they decided, if they want to try to get pregnant or get an agreement together and start planning that. Donors can move a lot faster. I could usually help, say, a single mom by choice or a lesbian couple find. I've even helped men find a surrogate and egg donor. But I would say that more of the target market is single moms by choice and lesbian couples on the donor side, where they just prefer to meet the donor instead of having an anonymous donor. Although they maintain, full control, they're the legal parents, they're responsible for everything, but they can have a relationship with the donor that they control, where maybe they see the person once in a while or once a year or not at all or every day or, whatever situation works best for them. And I've seen all different levels of involvement. Sometimes even I've seen donors that want to help out with the child. And I've had one person offer to pay for the child's education who was a donor. And, I've seen people living next door and just having like, it's a real like, modern family where it's like multiple people and the child feels love and support and consistency. And it's been a pretty positive thing. And I think it's really just starting. I mean, the first Modamily baby was born in 2013, I think. And so that baby is not even 10 years old right now. So I think it's something that's really still in its early stages. And, let's talk again in 10 years and see where some of those children have ended up. But for the most part, I've seen people had positive experiences from at least knowing that they have an alternate option to start their family when they thought they had no options other than what the traditional ways that they were thinking.
Wow. Well, that's so much. So there's a lot to unpack there, Yvonne. There's a lot of things to think about. I guess my first question
Yeah.
for you is something that I think people are going to be thinking about. And that is that, as you probably know, more and more people, because there is such a strong desire to know your donor, and in sperm donation, it's not quite as easy as an egg donation, that many people these days are finding donors online, which, can be very complicated. It can be very scary for a lot of people. There are, some people who are very well intended and some people who are not. And so maybe you can tell our listeners, like, what makes Modamily different and, than, let's say, going on Facebook and finding a donor or one of these groups online.
Yeah. So I would say that when you're going online to find a donor, there's probably, three different ways that people do that. One is a sperm bank, which is usually anonymous, where you can, you don't get to see adult pictures of the person. You can hear their voice, you can see their baby pictures and a lot of information, which is really great. And that's a good arrangement for some people, because some people don't want to know the donor. They just they're the family. They don't want a conflict. They don't want a third party involved. And that's totally understandable. And then if you're looking for a known donor, people either go to one of these, Facebook groups, which a lot of them could be, the Wild West, where you're on your own. You don't know what this person's intentions are. You don't really know how many babies they've had around the world. Some of these donors have fathered hundreds of kids. Some even have their own websites that have been profiled on TV. And some of them, they've had children all over the world, where, the laws are different in every country and state. And this donors have not gotten paperwork, and they've been sued for child support, or sometimes the donor would want some custody. And then these things need to be talked about beforehand. And that's why we definitely recommend any donation. Like, you need an agreement. You need to consciously know what you're getting into. It's good to talk to a therapist before you embark on these things, so you can answer any questions that you might have. So I would say, these Facebook groups, what I see a lot in them is that I see a lot of women that they sound like they're in a big rush. They don't really care. They want to find someone like today or tomorrow and get pregnant and meet them in a hotel room or something like that, which is something we totally don't recommend, which I know happens, but and I assume sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. So I would say the difference with Modamily is, especially when you work with Modamily concierges, we do more vetting. We pre-interview the person. We get family health histories. We can do background checks. We organize the blood work if you decide this is someone that you want to move forward with, and if they haven't been tested or tested their sperm quality, or make sure they're any kind of some women have say like conditions that they need to match with the right donor to not make it a higher case of something like cystic fibrosis or something like that, or the Ashkenazi gene, where you just need to make sure that the sperm and the egg are compatible, and that you do that testing before you get pregnant. So I would say, Modamily is an affordable way to find someone, and when you work with the concierge side, we help you do it responsibly and try to find someone that you develop a trust with, and someone that is looking for the same type of arrangement and relationship that you are. Where when you do it on your own on Facebook or something like that, it's kind of a lot to do by yourself, and you might not be aware of all the things that you need to be doing to responsibly come up with an arrangement like this.
So I guess that brings me to my next question. So do you work in conjunction with the attorneys to try to help kind of vet some of these people, or make sure that everything's kind of in alignment, or the donor's wishes are going to be, there's some degree of course, having to be able to be compatible, right? The donor and the recipient, in terms of what they both want out of the relationship,
Yep.
how they see their future is going to be. But then there's also a piece of it that's going to be important. Does that person, as you said, have any criminal history? Is there a psychological history?
Right.
Are there going to be legal problems? And so are you thinking about those things as you're kind of looking at the donor, or are you working with outside providers, or how does that work?
Yeah, usually we work with outside providers for that, where, because the laws are different in every state. So something that's, legal in New York or California might be a different story in Kansas or Alabama or Florida or something, somewhere like that. So I would say some of those other things you were talking about, we've worked with therapists before to find out, just so people can get in the room together and discuss any potential concerns they might have. So they really understand the relationship, because some people, the difference between a co-parent and a donor are two very different things. And some
Yes.
people don't understand that. Some people think, they're like, oh, I just want a donor, but I do want 50-50 involvement. I'm like, but that's not a donor. That's a co-parent.
Right.
So co-parent is more like, a divorced family without the divorce. And ideally, there might be a prenup or a divorce agreement, and you talk about custody and who's responsible for what financially. But in a co-parenting situation, usually both parents are on the birth certificate. They're both legal parents. They're both obligated. And a donor, even if it's a known donor, that person is not a legal parent. That person is not financially responsible. And you need to know, but how you get pregnant and how you go about the whole process could determine if you are the legal parent or if you are, responsible or not. And those things need to be figured out beforehand. And then having an agreement with an attorney, in the state that you live in or the country that you live in. I've had to deal with people that, say like someone in Canada found a donor in the United States, and then now you're dealing with two countries. And so I just really try to, I basically introduce our clients on the concierge side to professionals in their local community that has the expertise in terms of the laws and logistics of how they embark on a modern arrangement like this. And then as far as like the compatibility side, I try to help people, tell them the right way to go about things and not rush into things. I say you need to develop a trust with this person. You need to get to know them, because a background check, sure, a background check will pretty much only tell you, if the person has been to jail, if they got a DUI or something like that. Maybe you can find out their credit score.
Right.
You're not going to find out if they're, a drug or alcohol addict. You're not going to find out if they have mental issues.
Exactly.
And tell you what, you can marry someone and you might not know these things as well. So like until much later, until you're spending a lot of time with them. So that's why I recommend everyone, not to rush into things. We could facilitate these checks and do some, testing on the psychological side, do the legal agreements, but we don't do them ourselves because we're not experts in that area. We focus on the introductions and kind of letting people know how to proceed responsibly, but it's ultimately up to them. Sometimes people have financial constraints and they want to skip some steps, but I really tell them to some of these basic ones that it's worth the money, because it can cost you a lot more in the end if you don't do it responsibly in the beginning.
I'm with you 100% on that, Yvonne. We had spoken earlier, you and I met for coffee about these issues, and it is so important, I think, for our audience to kind of think about that and highlight that issue, that it is really, really important to understand if you're using donor conception, that your donor has had psychological screening. The background check is only going to show you what somebody was convicted for. Right. So if they were arrested for a crime or several crimes, or if they're a pedophile or, as you said, a drug addict, you wouldn't know. And so I think, your words of advice are very valuable. And so you're really giving these clients of yours counsel about what's going to be helpful to them in their search, and to really think through not just the short term of finding the donor and I like this person, but also the long term implications of what is this going to mean for your future? What's it going to mean for the children? How are you going to kind of manage this co-parenting or known donor relationship?
Right.
And kind of sort out what's going to be important to someone before they move forward and choose a donor, which is very valuable. And I think something that people don't really think about, because they just think, okay, well, I'm going to choose a donor. What is there to think about? So I think that's great.
A lot of times when people, think about choosing a donor, they just think about, say, the physical characteristics. They're like, oh, I want someone with blue eyes or the same skin tone as my partner or myself, or, or something, or someone that they dated before. And sure, that those things come into play. And we definitely search for, whatever physical descriptions are important to you. But we also search for, education levels, religious affiliations. How important is that to you? If they're interested in athletics or creativity, but just also you have to remember, just because your sperm donor went to Harvard doesn't mean your kid is going to Harvard. But sure, maybe that means they have a chance of having a higher IQ or being more creative, or if obviously if the donor is a former professional athlete or something like that, you'll probably have some genetic blessings on that side, but nothing is guaranteed. So we try to get them to come up, we come up with the criteria of like, what is most important to you? Is it physical characteristics? Is it religion? Is it intelligence? Is it, income? Is it their value system? Does it complement your value system? And, and also the type of arrangement that they're looking for. How often do they want to be involved? How often they don't want to be involved? So these are all the kind of criteria that we tell the person to keep in mind, and what we keep in mind when we're interviewing people for clients. And obviously, a lot of times you're not going to get, you know, everything all at the same time. Like tall, dark, and handsome, makes $1 million a year, went to Harvard, and played semi-professional tennis or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But you might get like two of those things, and so you just have to decide what's most important. And then, I feel like it's really just beginning, because all over the world, I think there's a general trend of, people are having kids later in life. People are having kids on their own more often than ever. Women are making just as much money. They're in the workforce. Even more women are in college now than men, than there was, 20, 30 years ago, and beyond. So women have more choice now. Their job is, the roles are a little more balanced, where, in the 50, 60 years ago, their focus might have been to, find a great husband that makes the money, and then they have the kids and take care of the house. And it's not really like that anymore. And women don't need to settle. So they don't want to marry someone, just for the sake of having children. And they have their independence. They have, their income and the success, and they want to be able to do it all and balance careers with family, and not having children, starting a family, hinder their career in individual pursuits. And I think that's the struggle a lot of people are having now. And I think also people are delaying children because having children is expensive. So it's, I think people get held back by like, oh my God, especially, a lot of people are living month to month. They didn't get that promotion yet. They're not saving. They're putting money away in savings. Rent is higher than ever. And they think like, I feel like I'm barely surviving on my own. How am I going to bring a child into this world and give them everything that I want to give them and offer them the best life possible? So, you know, that's why they're looking for partners, whether it's romantic or platonic. And on the donor side, I feel like they think it's important to know the person, and they want to find a donor that they can feel proud to introduce to their friends and family, as this is my daughter's donor, bio dad, and someone that the child can identify with and meet. So I think those are the reasons why people are kind of interested in a known donor as opposed to the anonymous side. And I think it's just starting. Like people, around the world, people are having kids later in life, and they have to make decisions. So we're seeing all these kind of families forming in Europe and South America and in the United States and Australia. And I even get calls from, Japan and Korea and China and Singapore.
Wow.
And where people, China had an issue where you only allowed to have one child, and it's usually a male child, decades ago. So that's affecting them now because there's not enough men. There's too many women. I mean, there's not enough women. There's too many men and not enough women. And there's an imbalance, and people are finding it a hard time to find partners. Same thing in Japan, where, the family is very dominant and close part of a person's life. And the children can get a lot of pressure to find a partner and get married and have children and have a great career. And, that's a growth area for us over there too, because people are looking for at other options than meeting the husband and wife, having two kids and the white picket fence. It's not necessarily, like that anymore, but people are kind of rolling with the times and trying to figure out the best way that they can accomplish all their life goals.
Right. And it is so complicated because, as you said, you have to really make a good match. And you might look for all of these things in a donor. And if you were to use donor from a sperm bank, then you maybe could kind of check off those boxes. But now you're dealing with a real person who also has interests, right? You're a donor, and which is really wonderful about talking to the donor is that, many things, but I think is that also we know that donor is signing up for the right thing, right? Very often donors will say, okay, I'm going to donate my sperm, and then kind of go about their merry way. And lo and behold, 20 years later, they've got all these offspring and they don't know how to handle it. And there's so much that happens, right? Here, you know what you're getting into, and, you're talking to these donors about the relationship that they want to have with the recipients and what that's going to look like and what their, visitation is going to look like, or do they feel comfortable with living in the same town or practicing the same religion or sharing holidays, or
Right.
there's so many things that they really have to think about. And so being able to kind of vet some of those things early on in the process, I think, is a great service for people.
Yeah. And I also, I try to, in a known donor relationship, generally speaking, the people looking for a known donor, they don't want someone that has 20 different kids. Like you said before, they really want someone that, they do this once or twice. And then, yeah, sure. If they get married later in life or they have their own children, their own families, that's to be expected. There's no way to control how many times someone is a donor right now.
Yeah.
But I try to, in the interviews, and I try to suss out their intentions. Why are they doing this? How many times have they done this? And I try to really go with people that are not the serial donor type, but really they want that relationship of knowing that they helped someone else start a family, and they can have some involvement, and they could be a friend of the family, like a great uncle type of role. That's kind of the scenario that that I think works well, and what people are really looking for when they're embarking on a known donor relationship, instead of the serial donor that has a few dozen kids around the world, and he's not really, involved in any of them. And, I think if it's a relationship like that, then you might as well just use an anonymous sperm bank where, you, at least they've tested the sperm, it's been quarantined, and it's a process that's worked for decades. Yeah, so it's really tough to prove any of these things. So you really need to develop that. It goes back to the trust of, like, getting to know the person for a longer period of time than just rushing into something and having a baby a week after, or trying to get pregnant a week after you meet someone. I really recommend, like, getting to know the person, even a donor side, like, you could even talk to their families or friends, and just have that relationship.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, I do have to say, of course, I do think it's important to do the psychological screening too, so everyone kind of knows what they're getting into. But it is so important to kind of also have that trust and that feeling that everyone understands what they're getting into and what they want to do with this relationship. What I've also been seeing just recently in just a small amount, is that there seems to be, a movement towards people having not just maybe the single parent with kids, but also multiple parents or extended families that look a little bit different, where maybe you have, like, as you said, like, you have a lesbian couple and then you have a man who's also co-parenting, or I have a family where I have three people who are involved in the children's lives, and they're using different
Hmm.
genetics, and all three of them live together, and they've worked out the situation that's really working for everybody. It's kind of like living with an extended family. And it's interesting because,
Yeah.
as an American, and I don't know if there'll be many international people listening to this podcast, but as an American, I kind of see a nuclear family a little bit differently. That's what I grew up with. But when I see my
Right.
international patients, some of them say, particularly a lot of my patients from South America will say, well, that's how we do it here anyway, right? We have this community,
Right.
and, I left, and my uncle took care of me because I left to America, and took care of me for a year. And then I came
Yep.
back, and then, somebody else took care of me. And then my sister went to somebody else's for, 6 months. And we just have this big extended family and community. And so maybe in some ways, we're moving back to that kind of more communal experience.
Yeah. Takes a village.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen, even in my own, I'm in a relationship for over a decade now with my girlfriend has two kids from a previous marriage, and her ex has a girlfriend, and it's a I've been helping raise those kids for 10 years, and I've seen other friends of mine and also people from Modamily that they live next door to each other, or it could be a lesbian couple and a gay couple that live next door, and the kids can go back and forth. They've usually say a lesbian couple, if they can, they would love, sometimes only one of the women wants to get pregnant. Sometimes both of them want to get pregnant at some point, and they would love to use the same donor. I even heard of people using, someone's, their brother or their, or their sister to be a
Mm-hmm.
donor, like to,
Yep.
to have some kind of genetic similarities to their partner,
Yes.
which is great. And I think I think those things are, as people are growing up, and there's so many with the 23s and me's and the DNA testing and all the ways that you can, find your, what used to be an anonymous donor back if you had if you were born in the 80s or something like that. It's becoming easier and easier to find, any siblings, any kind of people that are related to you that you didn't know before, whether it was through a donor or your parents got divorced and then they had more kids with somebody else, and it's all just one big modern family. And it's we have to face the facts that the traditional marriage that people are used to and kind of drilled into their head since they were very small. 50% of the time that relationship fails, and kids are living in two different homes. That's just something, especially my generation and people younger than me. They've we've all had friends that have divorced parents and got remarried and have half brothers and half sisters, and then LGBTQs are having children now more than ever, and since gay marriage became legal a while ago, and these things are constantly evolving, and I do think that the laws of our country need to catch up to the way people are having some of these families, and some of these modern families, if they're not necessarily married, they should still have some of the legal protections and advantages, and say tax advantages and things like that of people who are married. If you're raising a kid together, even if you're married or not, I think you should, that is a version of a family.
Mm-hmm.
You're both, involved, and you're both putting time and effort into making this child feel loved and have a consistent life, and not see, a different person walking through the door every week, and knowing what the schedule is. And, kids are, they get used to whatever situation they're in. So even if if they're going between homes, or you have two mommies or two daddies or three people that you call your parents, it's fine as long as the messaging is consistent, and the school systems that these families go to are accepting and understanding, and don't try to ridicule the people that are just trying to start a family and have a family and have that love and trust with each other. I think we all need to be more supportive of those kinds of families.
Yes, I agree. And I also agree. And, I want to emphasize that it is so important to make sure that we're open to all these new ideas. And at the same time, very cognizant of what you're saying is that we need to make sure that we have all the legal protections in place, that we do the psychological screening, that we do everything we can, and to really think forward, because ultimately it's a child's life who's going to be most affected by these arrangements. So we have to think about the best interests of the child first.
Right. And also on a national level, like, there's 50 different states with 50 different laws. And I think there should be some kind of uniformity in terms of when people are starting a family, and whether, determining whether someone's a donor or a parent. And
Yep.
they got to get it together on a federal level to just have some basic protections for people starting families like this.
I agree. I agree. And we're going to have to wind down now, but I hope that, Yvonne, you come back because I think you're sharing a lot of really important information for people to think about, and hopefully planting some seeds about what the options are, that we don't have to just kind of rush ahead and choose a donor, even though it's certainly understandable to feel that way because, for women, their biological clock is ticking, and there may be a strong desire to just kind of get the donor chosen and move forward. But all of these things are so important to consider because it is the rest of your life. So thank you so much for
Exactly.
coming. And before we end, can you share with our audience where people can find you and any information that will be valuable for them online?
Sure. You could just go to modamily.com, Modamily, short for Modern Family. You can download the app on iOS or Android, or create an account on the website, and concierge at modamily.com if you want to inquire about our known donor search program or co-parent search in certain cities. Happy to talk to everyone and give them advice and help. Thanks for having me, Lisa.
Terrific. Thank you so much for coming. Really, really appreciate seeing you again.
You too.
And for all of you out there, thank you so much for joining us. Please subscribe. That's how we keep going. And you can find us on familybuilding.net. You can look around. We have lots of information, and you can certainly join our mailing list and be part of our community. We would love to have you.
You start dating when you want to sleep no longer alone. For the first couple of years, a lot of people say, oh, they want you to sleep. I mean, they don't get enough sleep. They're sleep deprived, but they want to sleep alone. I mean, the last thing they want to do is have